Levi Carter limped into Dusty Bend with nothing but a patched coat and quiet eyes. Folks saw a drifter, the sheriff saw a threat. But Clay Barrett, a cowboy with steady hands, saw something more. When a forged warrant tried to bury Levi's name for good, Clay stood tall. A torn paper, a burning barn, and a little girl who later called him Papa. Will one man's quiet courage be enough to turn suspicion into belonging? Stay with us. This is a story of fire justice and finding roots where the wind once scattered you. The sun sat high over Dusty Bend, casting long shadows across the cracked earth and faded storefronts. It was the kind of heat that pulled sweat before thought and dried it before complaint. The wind, when it blew, only moved the dust, not the tension. That's when Levi Carter came limping in. He walked with the weariness of a man who had been outrun by better times and outlasted by worse. His coat was threadbare at the shoulders, one sleeve mended with mismatched stitching. His boots were more whole than leather, but it wasn't his look that got folks muttering, it was the silence. He didn't tip his hat, didn't nod, just kept walking with his eyes forward and his jaw set. Old man Lyle watched from the porch of the barber shop. "He don't look right," he whispered. "Don't need to look right," replied Elsie from the dry goods store. "Just needs to be trouble." Sheriff Bo Rake stepped into the middle of the street, thumb tucked in his belt, beside the long-barreled shotgun, slung lazy across his shoulder. He wasn't a big man, but power clung to him like tobacco spit, stubborn and sour. "You Rake called," not bothering to raise his voice. "We had a theft last week. Tools, dried meat, a saddle blanket. You look like you've been on the run a spell." Levi slowed, stopped, didn't flinch. "Got a name." Rake pressed. "Levi Carter. Got papers. No, sir. No job. No family. No reason to be here. That about right?" Levi didn't answer. Rake took a step closer. "We got laws in this town. You ain't in some arroyo where folks can vanish without notice. You want trouble, you just keep standing." The street was quiet save for the creak of a sign in the wind. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel. Clay Barrett stepped out of the general store, a burlap sack of oats slung over his shoulder. Mid-30s, tall, quiet, and tan from years in the sun. He wasn't the type to speak unless there was cause, and this, it seemed, was cause. "That ain't how we treat strangers," Clay said evenly. Rake turned his eyes, narrowing. "He's not from here. Neither was my granddad," Clay said. "Till he planted fence posts and stayed, he might be a thief. Then charge him. If you've got proof." Rake didn't answer. Clay dropped the oats into his wagon bed and turned to Levi. "You looking for work?" Levi blinked. "I can work. I've got fence lines need patching. Barn roof, too. You ride? Well enough. Then you can earn your supper." Clay didn't offer a handshake, just started walking toward his wagon. Levi hesitated, then followed. Someone spit in the dirt as they passed. Another muttered, "Should have let the sheriff run him out." Clay didn't turn around. Outside town, the land opened up wide, flat plains broken by mesquite scrub and dry creek beds. Clay's ranch sat low against the hills, modest but sturdy. Horses stirred as they approached one of them, a pale dapple-gray mare snorting softly at Levi's scent. "You'll sleep in the bunkhouse," Clay said. "There's water in the trough. Don't cross Mercy unless you want a mouthful of fence rail. She don't like strangers." Levi touched the mare's neck lightly. She shivered, then settled. Clay raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That night, Levi lay in a narrow bunk, hands folded behind his head. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind stirred the shutters, and somewhere across the dark pasture, Clay sat on the porch with a coffee mug and a rifle beside his boot. He didn't trust easy, but he had stood between a stranger and a loaded gun. And Levi Carter, once silent, whispered to no one in particular, "Might be I found a place, but tomorrow would tell." By sunrise, Levi Carter was already at work. The air still held the cool edge of night as he hauled lumber from the shed and hammered loose planks back into the fence line. Clay had left him a short list on the bunkhouse table. Fix south gate, check trough leaks, give Mercy a brush down. No small talk, just work. Levi didn't mind. He wasn't built for talk. By mid-morning, he was ankle-deep in mud, patching a slow leak in the main trough pipe with strips of saddle leather and wire. His hands worked quick and clean, the kind that had mended more things than they had ever broken. Mercy stood nearby watching. The dapple-gray mare still tossed her head at strangers, but not at him. She leaned into the brush when Levi cleaned her coat and snorted softly when he spoke. "She's testy," Clay said, walking up from the house with a tin cup in hand. "Never liked men much after the old ranch hand used a rough halter. She's got a good heart, Levi said. Just don't like being told. Clay nodded, then sipped his coffee. You work quiet, he added. I move better that way. Clay grinned faintly. Maybe that's why she tolerates you. By evening, the sky had turned gold and the barn cast long shadows over the pasture. Levi leaned against the rail, tired but satisfied when he heard hoofbeats, slow, deliberate. Sheriff Bo Rake rode in alone. He didn't dismount. His horse pawed the dust as he adjusted his hat and looked over the property. Well, look at that, Rake drawled. Stray's still here. That bunkhouse fire must have been a false alarm. Clay stepped down from the porch. You come to talk, he said. Say it plain. If you came to threaten, turn around. Rake grinned. Just wondering what kind of man lets a stranger camp under his roof. You trust too easy, Barrett. That barn of yours might not be standing come next frost. Clay took a step forward. If something happens to my barn, I'll know where to look. They locked eyes. Rake gave a low chuckle and tipped his hat. You got a real heroic streak, Clay. Just make sure you ain't backing the wrong man. He turned his horse and rode off, dust rising behind him like a warning. Clay watched him go, jaw set. You ever been in a barn fire? He asked Levi. No, sir. You'd remember if you had. Smoke chokes quicker than flames burn. That night, Levi double-checked the latches on the stall doors. He moved water buckets away from the wall and packed the old saddle blankets in the far corner, just in case. His sleep came light and full of stirred embers. Near midnight, a sharp crack echoed through the bunkhouse. Levi bolted upright. A window shattered glass and wood splintering across the floor. A rock thudded beside his cot, wrapped in twine and paper. He picked it up slowly. The note read, "He goes or this place burns." No name, no signature, just threat. Levi walked out into the night, bare feet crunching gravel, and handed the note to Clay, who was already on the porch with his rifle across his lap. Told you they'd try something, Clay said, unfolding the paper. What now? Levi asked. Clay folded it once tight. Now we make sure they regret trying. He set the rifle upright by the doorframe and poured 2 mugs of coffee, one for himself, one for Levi. They sat there for a long while, neither speaking, watching the hills. Out here, the lines were drawn quiet. But if they came again, Levi knew one thing for certain. This time, someone would be standing in the way. The next morning, the light hit Levi's bunkhouse wall like spilled gold. Dust drifted through the beams, slow and unbothered, unlike Levi. He stared at the rock from the night before, still on the table beside the empty coffee mug. The note was gone. Clay had burned it before dawn, the flame quick and final. Don't leave that kind of poison lying around, Clay had said. After breakfast, Levi brushed down Mercy again longer than usual. The mare nudged his shoulder once, then stood still as he adjusted her tack. Clay came up behind him. Ride with me, he said. There's a thing I need to ask you, and I don't reckon I want to ask it here. Levi didn't question it. He just nodded, swung into the saddle, and followed. They rode north where the cottonwoods gathered around a dry riverbed. The wind rustled high and thin. After an hour of silence, Clay finally spoke. You gotta pass, Levi. That don't make you special. We all do. But I need to know if there's something real chasing you, or just rumors wearing boots. Levi kept his eyes ahead. You ever hear of the Eagle Hollow freight line? Clay squinted. Down Mississippi Way, ran mail and cattle up to Memphis. Yeah, I worked there, couple years back. Clay waited. There was a fight in a saloon near the depot, Levi said finally. 2 men started it drunk stupid. One pulled a knife. I stepped in, pulled one of them off before it turned worse. Got cut in the process. You save anyone I tried. What happened? Sheriff saw blood and made guesses. Said I was part of it. Charged me with disturbing the peace and assault. I sat in a cell 3 weeks. Judge finally cleared it, said I did the right thing stepping in. You got papers to prove that. Levi shook his head. They said it'd be mailed. Never came. I figured the paper didn't matter if the truth was known. Clay grunted. That's not how this town works. They turned back toward the ranch. That afternoon, Clay rode into Dusty Bend alone. The postmaster raised his brows when Clay asked to send a wire. Official business, personal. He scribbled out a message on a lined sheet and slid it across the counter. To Judge Malcolm Reed, Vicksburg, District Court, subject incident report on Levi Carter, freight, saloon fight, requesting official clarification. disposition, and record status. Send copy or statement via telegraph or certified mail. C. Barrett, Dusty, Bend, N.M. The postmaster read it twice, whistled, then nodded. Mail leaves tomorrow, he said. Might take a week, maybe more. Clay left without looking back. When he returned, Levi was finishing the barn roof shirt, damp with sweat hammer steady. Wrote to a judge in Mississippi, Clay said. Figured we'd let facts do the talking for once. Levi paused, then nodded. Appreciate that. Clay shrugged. Just want to know who I'm standing beside. 3 days passed, then a week. On the 9th day, a rider from the depot arrived with a yellow envelope. Clay opened it at the kitchen table while Levi stood nearby. The telegram was short. Levi Carter, cleared of all charges, incident deemed justified intervention, no conviction, signed Judge M. Reed. Clay passed it over. Levi stared at the words like they might vanish. That mean I'm free to stay? Clay looked him straight in the eye. Means you always were, but now we've got proof for the folks who need it. For the first time since he'd arrived, Levi smiled small but real. Out past the barn, Mercy let out a long breath and stomped the dirt. The sun hung low, casting light on something finally made right. Founders Sunday came with warm sun, fresh-cut wildflowers on the chapel steps and more pies than a man could count. Every family within 10 miles of Dusty Bend came to the green behind the church, laughing, eating, swapping stories. The old preacher even managed to tune the chapel piano. It had been years. Clay wasn't much for gatherings, but this year he showed up clean-shaven and early. He brought a basket of apples, a repaired wheelbarrow, and Levi Carter. Better they see your hands helping than guessing what they've done, Clay had said that morning, handing Levi a clean shirt and a quiet nod. Levi didn't argue. He buttoned the shirt slow like it still didn't quite fit him right. But when they reached the chapel yard, he carried the wheelbarrow like it weighed nothing and took his spot beside the stew pots without a word. A few folks stared. One man turned away, but Mrs. Josie Halburn, gray hair piled high and apron dusted in flour, handed Levi a ladle like she'd been waiting all morning. Stir it slow or it'll scorch, she said matter of fact. Levi stirred. Then he served, cup after cup, quiet, polite, no ruckus. By midday, the tension had shifted. Children ran barefoot. Teenagers tossed beanbags. Levi helped 2 boys get their kite unstuck from the chapel's weather vane. He fixed a wagon axle with a strip of leather and a borrowed hammer. And when the sack race was short, a partner he paired up with a farmer's son and stumbled across the finish line, grinning like he forgot what worry felt like. Clay watched from beneath the oak tree, arms crossed. He noticed folks nodding, just barely, but it was there. Then a stranger stepped down from a passing buckboard. Tall man, mustache trimmed sharp, dusty traveling coat. He squinted across the crowd, then pointed. "Hey," he barked, "ain't you that freight hand from the Vicksburg mess?" The cheer dropped like a stone in a well. Levi's body tensed. His eyes didn't move, but his hands clenched tight around the ladle handle. Sheriff Rake's deputy, young Elmer Boone, was on him in 3 strides, badge glinting in the sun. He held out a pair of worn cuffs, fingers twitching. "Step aside," Boone said. "Got probable cause to detain." Clay stepped in before Levi could move. "Got a telegram says otherwise," he said calmly, pulling the folded slip from his vest pocket. Boone took it, read it, and scratched his chin. "This real? You want to ride down to the telegraph office and ask Sam yourself," Clay offered. Boone hesitated, lips pressed tight. He looked at the crowd faces watching, waiting. "No charges, no warrant, no cause," Clay said. "He stays." The traveler muttered something under his breath and walked back to his rig. Boone pocketed the cuffs and backed off slow. Nobody cheered, but Mrs. Halburn handed Levi a fresh cup of lemonade and said, "Kite stuck again." He nodded, already walking. Later that afternoon, Clay and Levi sat near the creek edge as the last of the picnic crowd drifted home. "Didn't expect that, man," Levi said quietly. "Expecting trouble don't mean you're ready for it," Clay replied. "You kept your head. That's what matters." Levi looked down at his hands, still stained from stew sweat and fence oil. They'll always see what they want. Clay tossed a pebble into the stream. "Then let's make sure they see something worth looking at." The water rippled, and somewhere upstream a child laughed. It was a small sound, but it held. The days after the picnic passed quiet, but the kind of quiet that presses on your chest like a warning. Levi went back to work patching pasture fences and cleaning soot from the old smokehouse roof. Clay didn't say much, but he kept checking the barn doors twice, then 3 times each night, and he started locking the feed room, though he'd never bothered before. "Don't reckon trouble's done with us," he muttered one evening, tossing another log on the fire. "Just changed its boots." That night, the wind picked up early, dry and fast from the west. Clay didn't sleep much. He'd left the lamp on in the kitchen, the rifle loaded behind the door. It was Mercy's scream that woke them. The mare's shriek cracked the stillness like a gunshot. Clay and Levi were out of bed and running barefoot through the yard in seconds. The barn was already burning. Flames climbed the siding in sheets. Sparks spit into the sky like angry fireflies. The hay inside hissed and roared. The doors were bolted shut from the outside. Clay shouldered through the heat and kicked them open. Levi grabbed a rail and hauled them wide. Smoke poured out thick and choking. The horses inside screamed again. Levi didn't pause. He ran into the fire. Clay grabbed a water bucket, then cursed and followed. Inside was chaos. Mercy thrashed in her stall, eyes rolling. Levi unclipped her halter blind and slapped her flank. She bolted through the doors into the night. The others followed, stamping and crying, but alive. By the time the last horse was out, the flames had eaten the tool loft. Clay pulled Levi from the edge just as a beam dropped behind them with a crack that shook the dirt. They fell into the grass, coughing, hands raw and hair singed. By dawn, the barn was nothing but black timbers and scorched nails. The sun rose behind it, a cold witness. Levi stood looking at the wreckage shirt clinging to his back, arms hanging loose. "I'll pack," he said, voice low. Clay didn't even look at him. "No, this ain't worth your land, or your sleep." "You don't get to decide that," Clay snapped, turning. "You didn't light the fire." "But I brought the match," Levi replied, eyes rimmed red. Clay stepped closer, jaw tight. "You think I built this place so it could fold the first time a coward's had struck a match?" Levi looked away. Clay took his bag, dropped it in the dirt, and ground it under one boot. "You want to leave? Do it walking. But don't pretend you're doing it for me." Levi said nothing, just picked up a shovel. That day they dug and dragged and sweat. Neighbors came, not many but enough. Buckets passed, boards salvaged. By dusk, a frame stood where the barn had been. It wasn't much, but it stood. After sunset, Clay sat on the porch, hands blistered and face smudged. Levi brought out 2 tin cups. Water, no whiskey tonight. "You still think this ain't worth it?" Clay asked, not looking. Levi didn't answer right away. Then he said, "It's been a long time since I saw anyone rebuild after me." Clay let out a slow breath. "Then we keep going. Till the next fire, if need be." Levi raised his cup quiet. The wind had stilled. The night was calm. But both men knew it wouldn't last. The sun had barely crested over the mesa when Clay stepped onto the porch with coffee in hand. The rebuilt barn stood behind him, framed but roofless, like a promise not yet kept. Levi was already at the trough, sleeves rolled, boots wet from morning dew. But peace in Dusty Bend never lingered long. Hooves clattered up the road just as the kettle began to hiss. Clay narrowed his eyes. Sheriff Rake rode at the front, flanked by 2 deputies, Elmer Boone and a scowling man Clay didn't recognize. Their horses moved like they meant business. Rake swung down before the dust even settled. "Where is he?" he barked. Levi stepped out from behind the bunkhouse, brow-drawn, shovel still in hand. Rake held up a folded paper. "Warrant out of Yazoo County. Levi Carter wanted for horse theft." Clay didn't move. "Yazoo's in Mississippi." "Good to know your geography," Rake said, smirking. "Now, step aside." Clay reached out. "Let me see it." Rake hesitated. Boone looked uneasy. The paper was flimsy. Wrong seal, wrong signature. The man supposedly filing the complaint, Eustace Broder, had been killed 2 years prior in a sawmill collapse. Clay knew because it made the papers, and Eustace owed him a saddle. "This is fake," Clay said. "Don't matter," Rake replied. "A warrant's a warrant until it ain't." The deputy stepped forward. Levi dropped the shovel. "It's all right," he said quietly. "No," Clay snapped. "You walk into that jail, you might not walk out." "I know," Levi raised his hands. "But running proves I'm right. I'm tired of running." Rake slapped on the cuffs like it gave him pleasure. They rode him through Main Street at a crawl. Folks turned their heads. A few whispered. One child pointed. Nobody stepped forward. Clay rode behind them, fists white on the reins. By the time Levi was locked in the single-cell jailhouse, Clay was already in the mayor's office demanding an emergency hearing. The mayor, a thin man who hated confrontation, mumbled something about needing proper channels. Clay stormed out. At home, he sat down and wrote, his pen scratched like a blade across paper. The letter was to Judge Malcolm Reed, the same judge who'd dismissed Levi's case in Vicksburg. Clay included a copy of the telegram, a note about the forged warrant, and one truth Rake hadn't figured Clay still had friends in the marshal's circuit. He sealed it with wax road straight to the depot and handed it to the conductor of the westbound freight. Judge Reed. Urgent, he said. The conductor nodded. I'll see it gets there. That night, Clay slept with one eye open and the rifle close. Meanwhile, Levi sat on a narrow cot staring at the wall. The jail was quiet, save for the creak of old wood and the ticking of a rusted clock. Then came a sound barely a whisper, a soft shuffle and a clink. A tray slid through the floor slot. On it sat a mug of coffee, a biscuit, and a folded note. Levi looked up. Old Gus, the janitor who once ran cattle for Clay's father, gave a subtle nod and shuffled off. Levi unfolded the note. Smudged, hurried handwriting read, "Check the freight ledger. They leased before they filed." Levi blinked, then smiled just barely. He sat back, biscuit untouched. Morning would come, and with it more lies. But Clay was riding, and Levi wasn't alone. The sun hung heavy over Dusty Bend, like it knew something was coming. It was auction day. Folks from all corners of the county gathered near the depot where makeshift stalls stood, and a chalkboard listed parcels for bid. Sheriff Rake strutted like he owned the dust under his boots. Deputies posted near the saloon, eyes sharp. The jail remained locked, Levi still inside, though not forgotten. Clay Barrett stood near the edge of the square, quiet but steady. He didn't pace, he didn't shout, he just watched. Then at noon, sharp the stagecoach rolled in. A tall, lean man stepped off, gray hair, black coat, and a leather satchel under one arm. His badge didn't glint, but the presence it carried cut sharper than any star. "Name's Malcolm Reed," he said to the nearest deputy. "I'll be taking part in the day's business." The square shifted. Some folks blinked, others stepped back. And Sheriff Rake, half a sandwich still in hand, froze mid-chew. Clay nodded once from across the crowd. Reed climbed up onto the auction platform, opened his satchel, and began reading. "Town of Dusty Bend, on the matter of Levi Carter. I hold in my hand a telegram sent by Mr. Barrett and a forged warrant bearing the name of a dead man. I also hold Carter's cleared record sealed and certified out of Vicksburg. There is no standing charge." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He turned to Rake. "Did you sign this?" Rake stepped up, swagger gone. "That man's dangerous. He had no business here to begin with. And you have no business inventing charges." Reed held up a freight manifest. "According to this, you arranged a land lease in Yazoo County a full month before this so-called theft occurred, which means you faked the complaint, Sheriff." Clay stepped forward holding the warrant. "We all know Levi's been accused before, but the truth ain't always what folks whisper." He ripped the paper clean in half. The sound carried across the square like a gunshot. Rake lunged, but Reed was faster. "Enough," the judge barked. "Sheriff Rake, you are hereby relieved of duty pending formal inquiry." That's when two state marshals stepped from the crowd, as if they had been waiting for the cue. They took the former sheriff by each arm, and this time nobody cheered, but nobody stopped them either. A quiet fell thick and strange, like something uncoiled. Then from behind the platform came a small voice. "Where's Mr. Levi?" It was Nora Bell's little girl, braids down her back, holding a hand-drawn picture of a blacksmith's anvil. Clay knelt beside her. "He'll be here real soon, darlin'." Judge Reed stepped down. "Mr. Carter's to be released immediately." 10 minutes later, Levi emerged from the jail, shirt-rumpled eyes scanning the crowd. He didn't smile, but his shoulders were straighter than they had been since the day he arrived. Clay met him halfway. "Told you I'd ride?" Levi just said, "Yeah," and shook his hand. The mayor shuffled onto the platform next, awkward and red-faced. "We'll be auditing land deeds filed these past 2 years. Seems we've let a few things slide." Nobody clapped, but heads nodded. That was enough. The square didn't roar. No bands played. But in that quiet came something better than noise respect. And as Levi looked out over the crowd, some curious, some sheepish, he finally said it out loud. "I'm staying. If that's all right." Someone near the back murmured, "It's about time." The sun hadn't changed, but the town sure had. With Sheriff Rake cuffed and loaded onto the marshal's coach, a silence settled over Dusty Bend, different from the wary kind Levi Carter first walked into. This one felt like space being made, not taken. Levi stood by the hitching post, watching the dust trail behind the wagon that carried the man who'd tried to erase him. Clay Barrett came up beside him with 2 tin mugs and a slow smile. "Thought we'd have to build you a bunk at the jail, not the forge," Clay said. Levi accepted the coffee warm and sharp. Funny how truth don't ride as fast as rumor. But it got here. Clay sipped. That it did. Word spread quick after the square showdown. Rake's deputies disappeared like tumbleweed on the wind, and the mayor, suddenly far more involved, offered Levi a proposition. "I heard you know tools," the mayor said awkwardly at the ranch gate that evening. "Our smithy left months ago. Forge is cold. Town needs a man with hands that build." Levi didn't answer right away. He turned, saw Clay watching from the porch, arms crossed but nodding. "You want that forge?" Clay asked later, tossing a satchel of nails into the barn. "Town's yours if you say so, or you can ride out now, clear and free." Levi ran a hand over the splintered wood where they'd patched the barn fire. "I don't want free. Not anymore." By the next morning, the forge doors were open, soot swept out, and a new horseshoe glowing red in the hearth. It rang with a steady rhythm, the kind a place listens to. At first, folks came quiet, just to watch, a bridle fixed, a wagon wheel realigned. Then Nora Bell's boy Charlie brought a broken plow blade and lingered to ask, "How do you know when iron's ready?" Levi pointed to the color. "When it glows like a sunrise. That's when it'll shape." By week's end, kids were showing up after chores not for pay, but to watch the fire and ask questions. Clay built a lean-to on the side, said Levi'd need a dry spot for apprentices soon. They rebuilt the barn together, not in wood this time, but with stone from the ridge dragged down in wagons and stacked by hand. No blueprint, just shared weight and quiet work. On a Thursday evening with supper cooling and the hammer finally set down, a knock came at Clay's door. It was Nora Bell's daughter, tiny, curious, holding something behind her back. She looked up at Levi with eyes too old for her age and said, "Mama says you fix things." Levi crouched. "I try." She held out a tin cup. Old, bent and scratched, but on the side, careful letters read, "Daddy." Clay froze behind him. The room did too. Levi touched the rim, voice soft. "Where'd you get this?" "Made it at school," she said. "Teacher asked who we wanted to give thanks to." Clay didn't speak, didn't have to. That night, Levi left the cup by the forge just where the morning light would hit it. It wasn't his, not yet, but maybe it was becoming so. The next Sunday, the chapel green filled again, this time not for trials, but for music and pie. When Levi walked up with soot on his shirt and a girl on his shoulders, folks didn't turn away. A nod, a handshake, a laugh even. Belonging doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it just walks beside you until you finally look over and see it's there to stay. Spring came early that year. Warmth moved through Dusty Bend like a hush after prayer, quiet but sure. The wildflowers along the ridge flared in colors they hadn't seen in years, and down by the smithy Levi Carter's forge burned steady, a heartbeat of iron and fire. Levi stood under the cottonwood tree near the ridge, hands dusted with soot, watching as the town's boys hammered bent nails into a plank, practicing their first horseshoe. The rhythm wasn't right yet, but he let them figure it out themselves. Behind him, Clay Barrett leaned on the fence with that half grin he wore when he knew something but wasn't about to say it. "They're making more noise than sense," Clay drawled. Levi didn't turn. "Yeah, but give it time. Sooner or later, even rough hands learn the song." Down by the barn, Mercy Clay's once wild mare nuzzled a child who clung to her mane like it was gospel. The girl giggled and Levi's eyes softened. She didn't call him Mr. Carter anymore. She just called him Daddy. He hadn't corrected her once. Cora Bell passed with a basket of sweetbread, nodding toward the forge. "Mayor says the school's asking if you'll show the older ones how to temper blades next week." Levi blinked, almost laughed. "They know that's hot work, right?" "They want hot work," Cora said, smiling. "They want to know how you do what you do, how you stayed." He looked back at Clay, who just gave him a slow shrug. "You did stay," Clay said. "Even when you had no reason to?" Levi exhaled, shoulders lowering like a weight had been slid off. "Guess it was never about the reasons, just the choice." That afternoon, they finished the stone troughs behind the new barn. Not because they had to more, because it felt like closing a circle. The barn had risen again stronger. The town had shifted too, though it hadn't happened all at once. It started with eye contact, then a few brave hellos, and now neighbors. At sundown, Levi stood by the porch rail of Clay's ranch house, his ranch now too in all but title. The sunset hit the fields in bands of orange and gold, lighting up the pasture like something worth keeping. "Funny thing," Clay said, handing him a mug of cider. "Most folks thought you'd ride on. Leave once your name was clear." Levi turned the cup in his hand, staring at the scratch marks left by a child's spoon. Had nothing to run to, and turns out there's more to be made standing still. Clay nodded, then said nothing for a while, the kind of silence that felt earned. Across the yard, the girl came running, a tin cup in her hands, banged up, scratched, but polished clean. She held it out with a wide grin. "I made a new one," she beamed. "This one's stronger. It won't dent like the first." Levi took it, eyes warming. On the side, carved careful and crooked family. He crouched low, drawing her into a hug. "Well, I'll be. Looks like I belong to something now." From behind them, the town bell chimed, soft, a signal of evening peace. Later that night, as the forge cooled and the porch light glowed dim, Levi set the tin cup on the mantel above the hearth. It sat there quiet, no louder than truth needs to be. Once he'd been just a drifter, a man with a name but nowhere to place it. Now he had roots. And in a town like Dusty Bend, where fences once marked fear, those same fences now held something: real family trust, and a fire that didn't burn barns but kept the cold out. Drop a comment if you've ever found home in the place that tried to push you out, and don't forget to subscribe for more true grit Western stories of redemption, justice, and quiet belonging.